Welcome to Global Change Agents, the show where some of the world's most influential women across business, technology, and academia will discuss how they're bringing about radical change in their industries and beyond. Joining me today is Esther Wojcicki, a journalist and award-winning educator who has been dubbed the Godmother of Silicon Valley. The mother of YouTube CEO Susan, 23andMe founder Anne, and anthropologist Janet, Esther is one of the foremost experts in preparing children and adults to succeed. So Esther, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, it's fantastic you joining us here all the way in London, back from Silicon Valley.
Yes.
But we've got so much to talk about, but I'd love to go right back to the beginning. So tell me a bit about your childhood and, of course, how that shaped you later on.
I grew up in a sort of an impoverished environment because my parents were immigrants to the United States from Russia. And so my father was an artist. And as a result, you know, artists don't earn a lot of money. And so we didn't have a lot of money. And unfortunately, you know, he went from the east to the west. Go west, young man, see if you can find your outcome, your life. And it didn't work out quite the way he planned it to work out. And so I had a somewhat difficult childhood. There was a tragedy that happened when I was about 10 years old. And I had a third brother, there was a third child, and I found a second brother named David. And he was in the kitchen playing with a bottle of aspirin on the floor. And it was prior to the days when they had child safety caps. So he opened this bottle and then he ate it. And you would think it'd be terrible, but he ate it. And then my mother, not knowing what to do, being an immigrant, called the doctor and said, well, what should I do? You know, my child just did this. And she said, or the doctor said, put him to bed and see how he is in a few hours. Well, any sort of thinking person would know that that's not the right thing to do. But my mother just believed what he said. And so she put him to bed. In a few hours, he was really violently ill. And as a result, we took him to a hospital. It was a local community hospital where they pumped his stomach, but they wouldn't keep him. But he was still really ill. So we went from hospital to hospital. In the US, you know, you don't get free medical care. And so he wasn't accepted in any of the other hospitals because we didn't have proof of payment. So by the fourth hospital, they finally accepted him, but then it was unfortunately too late and he died. So this impacted my life as a child. I didn't realize it as a child, what was really going to be happening. I just realized what a tragedy had happened. But what the long-term result of that is that I didn't believe anybody in authority. Whenever an authority figure told me something, I just always felt I had to check it out. I had to make sure that they were right. And it was kind of a life or death issue, you know. And like I said, it wasn't conscious, it was an unconscious thing. And so that impacted the way that I brought up my children and the way that I taught as a teacher, because I was always wanting them to be able to think and being able to question authority and being able to be independent. And I think, if I think back on it, that is one of the reasons why I question the whole education system. Is like, is it really doing what it should be doing for students? You know, is parenting really doing what it should be doing for parenting? Are we bringing up a generation of kids that are dependent on their parents? Or are we bringing up a generation of kids that can think independently and feel good about themselves? So that's my background. And I was lucky to get a full scholarship to University of California at Berkeley. I applied to one school and I fortunately got into that one school. And I got a graduate degree in journalism, and the reason that I did that was because I really, again, wanted to protect the underdog. That was my goal. That's right. I want to write your story. I want to make sure that everybody hears the story about what you want to say, but you maybe don't have the tools to do it.
So whether you were questioning authority consciously or unconsciously, especially when you were still a child yourself and going through school, how did you forge your own path, and how did you actually establish those grounds to explore or question things when you're taught at a very early age that you always listen to your parents no matter what they say, and you always follow whatever the teachers instruct you to do?
Well, I was just a rebel, a maverick. And I did not always follow what they said I should do. So that got me into trouble sometimes. And I think that, you know, kids that don't follow the beaten path, you know, parents get upset about that. But those are the ones that are the free thinkers. Those are the ones that might be making change for society. So, you know, I don't think parents should get upset when their child is not following the path and doing 100% on their tests and things like that. We want people that think independently and that are able to solve the problems we have here on this planet, because we have a lot of planet problems and we're all on one planet together. I don't think at least I don't want to go to Mars. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm staying here. And so I think we all need to work together. And so some of the other things that I did, in high school, I went to a school where it was so crowded that they had to have 2 different sessions for the students. So the first group went from 7 to 11:30, and the second group went from 12 to 4. And that's because they didn't have enough facilities. And so I think I might have been the only student in the school that requested permission to go to both sessions. Nobody else ever, I don't think. I had no competition because they said yes right away. And the advantage to me is that I got to take twice as much stuff, and I got to learn more. I didn't realize that I was trying to protect myself. I just realized I wanted to know as much as I could about the world so that I could be independent and protect myself and protect whoever was around me. So that was another thing that really changed my life. And like I said, being in journalism, journalists have front row seat on life. You ask all the questions. You're there when things are happening. If you don't ask the right questions, you can't write the right story. And that's part of the reason why I think journalism is a curriculum for all students. All students need to have this kind of a skill of being able to question and ask questions no matter who they're talking to. They shouldn't be afraid to ask a question and then get that information and then decide for themselves whether that information is valid and be able to write about it. This is one of the reasons why I teach journalism and why I think these skills are skills for all students for the 21st century, because we're all journalists. Everybody's producing stuff on their phones today, everywhere. And we have this opportunity. And so we should have the ethics and the skills and the know-how how to do it in a way that matters for all of us, so that we're not promoting things that are fake, and not promoting things that we don't agree should be promoted.
So it would be great to hear more about the Palo Alto High School, and obviously over 3 decades, building up that department. It's arguably one of the most prestigious kind of journalism schools, even though it's for younger students. Usually you only get that when you go to university. Can you talk a bit about that and expand more on, the kind of programs that would be provided, how the running of the structure is for kids to get into journalism at that school?
So I can give you a little bit background on it. So I started doing it in 1984, and at that time there were just a few people in the program, maybe 19 students in the program. It was very top-down, teacher-directed, the same programs that most people expect. And then within a couple of years of doing that, I realized my students really weren't learning anything, but I was following the prescription that the school district had laid out for me. And so what I did is I took a risk, and I decided to actually throw out the curriculum and throw out the book. And then I waited around to see whether I'd be fired. And fortunately, I was not fired because they never even noticed I threw out the book. They just noticed that somehow or other there seemed to be a lot of kids signing up for that class, and like what was going on. And the fact is, what was going on is that I had moved the control from me to the students. I had given them a lot of control of what they were doing and what they were writing about, and I gave them control of the number of pages in the paper and so forth. And the word spread. I was not doing any advertising. The kids tell each other about, oh, you should take this class. This is the reason. And sometimes the administration worried, like, what is she doing in that class? And all I was giving away was freedom. Everybody wants to be in control. And then throughout the years, I continued this, and I am now doing it. This program is now the largest in the United States, and now have about 700 plus students in the program, 7 other teachers, and we have about 10 different publications. So we're kind of like the media place for kids in a high school setting. And I'd like to be able to offer this to all kids. All kids should have this opportunity to, I mean, you can publish for free today on the web. You know, there's so many opportunities. My students want to publish in hard copy. I find that interesting because everybody said, oh, hard copy, that's passé. Turns out they really like hard copy. And so maybe other schools want to do that too. There is possibility for publishing in hard copy easily. I have people that are doing it. And worldwide, I think there's a lot of opportunity. So highlight students and highlight their work. Give them an opportunity to shine. Give them an opportunity to have their voices heard. And that's what it's all about.
So, I mean, as someone who has literally thrown out the book when it's come to some procedures before and way things have always been done. I mean, about 2 years ago, you said that one of the biggest problems in the US was the education system. And of course, when it's about bringing about change, that means breaking down those traditional structure sets, rule sets, things like that. I know with obviously the journalism program, and you're saying you want to broaden it out for all students. There's two things. Are you seeing an attitude change in terms of the education system wanting to adopt newer ideas and processes? Have you seen any improvements, or is it a real big battle to get kind of the wider education system to get on board with some of the proposals that you have?
So I think the education system does want to change. I mean, they realize that things need to change for the 21st century. Last century, we were looking for people that followed rules all the time, and factory workers. And so the number one thing we wanted you to do is follow directions. This century, we want people who can think, people who can communicate, who are creative, who are critical thinkers, who collaborate. That's what all the employers want. They want people like this. So in order to get people like this, we have to train them differently. And right now, and so the education system's aware of that, but right now we're training them for the last century. And so that's part of what my book is about. So the book has an acronym, TRIC, and that goes for parenting, and it goes for schools, and it goes for industry. And basically, TRIC stands for trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. And so I say that this belongs in all schools. And I don't have anybody that disagrees with me. The question is how? How are we going to get that into all schools? And my most recent philosophy is let's do it 20% of the time. 80% of the time it still can be traditional, top-down, lecture-based, follow directions, take tests. Just 20% of the time. Open that up to kids having their own ideas, an opportunity to work on their own projects. Projects they come up with, projects they care about, projects that matter to them. And if you give kids that freedom, and then the school supports that time, that's in school time, not after school, because everybody's like trying to do it after school. After school, a lot of kids have to go home to work, or they have family responsibilities. They should have this opportunity in school to be creative and to prepare themselves for the 21st century. They can make apps, they can work on I don't know, all kinds of computer projects, they can work on gardening projects, they can work on anything that matters to them. But the first thing they have to do is figure out what they want to do. And as long as a school is in a position of telling them what to do all the time, they're never going to be creative. You can't be creative as long as you're following instructions. So that's how the education system needs to change. I've talked to many educators, and they're really interested in doing that. And the how needs to come from each individual school. How are we going to be able to empower our students to have this 20% time? It's going to be different in the UK from the way it will be in the US, the way it will be in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Italy, Mexico, whatever. They're all going to be different, but they all can come up with this idea of giving students some control over their learning. That's the biggest change that has to happen in the 21st century.
When it comes to that big change, especially when it comes to, I suppose, evolution and especially with all the studies out there and people like yourself going, hey, we need to think about things differently. And especially when it comes to the moonshots of the 20% of time being creative. What would you say to those critics who are going, this all sounds great, but some children really need direction, and that pocket of allowance to have that creativity may mean that, you know, kids lose their way. They can be like a bit more to, I want to do my hobby all the time, or want to go skateboarding all the time, whatever kids do these days, you know, that kind of thing. What would you say to that?
I would say that, you know, you have to allow for some chaos. So I had a student that just described my class to a friend, actually it was online, I have this video. And he said when he first came into the class, my class is big, there's like about 60 kids in the class. He's like, oh my God, it looks like chaos. Some kids are working, some kids are like talking to each other. Some kids, they even look like they might be sleeping. What are they doing? Or, you know, but what happens is that they're all working on something that matters to them. And so creativity comes from chaos. Creativity doesn't come from sitting in a classroom, quietly sitting there, not talking to someone else. And so they have to understand that 20% time might look a little crazy. I wouldn't sanction having a skateboard or sanction doing, you know, all these athletic things. They'd have to do something that fits within the four walls of a school, so that but they can still do all these projects and these ideas. They still have to stay on campus. They cannot go outside of the campus. At least, you know, in the US, we have all these rules and regulations. You have to stay on campus. But they can still work on these things and come up with these ideas. And just like my students do this journalism project, that's that's something that they work on. You know, I actually have in the schedule, they're only booked to be in that class about 6 hours every 3 weeks. And they want to stay after school, so they spend an extra 30 hours of their own free time working on this program because they're so engaged in it. So, you know, the kids can start their things and work with their friends in school and then continue it at home. You never know. I mean, I just have a student that just started a company doing freight forwarding. Freight forwarding, who would ever think that that was exciting? You know, but he's decided that's what he wants to do. He's 19. And now he's doing it all in Latin America. And he got himself funded. So who knows what they are going to be doing? You, the parent, you know, you have things that were important to you, you know, when you were a teenager. You have to give your teenagers that same opportunity to let them come up with their ideas of what's important to them now. And if you don't give them that freedom and allow some chaos, not going to happen. They're just going to sit there, follow instructions, and then they'll be bored and depressed.
Yeah.
And we don't want either of those. No boredom,
absolutely.
No depression.
So there's another part to that I find really interesting that, you know, the Wojcicki HQ, you would say, is in Silicon Valley, and there's very much of the DNA of, you know, innovation, it's tech orientated, and obviously even when it comes to the Palo Alto High School with all the journalism program, that's very innovative too. But for all other parts of the world where it's not as concentrated with that kind of DNA, how would you say about when we talk about creativity, that tech needs to be part of that? I thought it was really refreshing just now when you were talking about all these creative projects that people are working on apps. But there's also in the wider talk, especially within, you know, business leaders, things like that, and also developments in especially early learning development. This fear about screen time, this fear about you know, technology being too much of a part of children's lives. Do you think there needs to be an education on the adult side as well to how important it is to nurture technology as part of a child's learning?
Technology is a part of the child's learning because we're all growing up in an age of technology. To ignore it, it's like ignoring cars at the beginning of the 1900s, right? That, oh no, we're not going to use those, they're dangerous, we're going to use the horse and buggy. No, we all are living in an age of technology. So I do not recommend children have screen time and much screen time at all before the age of 5. So I think parents that are giving their kids an iPad or a phone or something else just as a babysitter, what you're doing is you're training that child to use that iPad whenever they're bored. Boredom is part of life. That's where creativity comes. So if you give your child an iPad or a phone, just limit it a small amount of time. And if they're upset, they have to learn to get along in life without just running and looking for a electronic device. And as parents, when you're with your child and you're parenting, don't be on your phone. Because I've seen a lot of parents like, oh, we're going to the park together, right? So the child goes on the swings or the slide or whatever, and what is the parent doing? On their phone, right? That's not together. Okay, so I think you need to model for your child the kind of behavior you want that child to do. Children do what they see you do, not what you say. Okay, if you say one thing and do something else, they're going to do what you do, not what you say. So I think it's really important to introduce technology and explain to them how it's a collaborative effort. So parents they're struggling today with a lot of their kids. It's like too much time on the phone, too much time on the computer. So what they need to do is set up a collaboration. Okay, we know how many hours there are in a day, how many things we want to do in a day. Why don't we figure this out? I will help you figure out. For 1 hour, you can figure out what you want to do, and another hour, it's going to be something I suggest. So it's collaboration, so the parent has some input into what they're doing. There's a website out there called Common Sense Media. It ranks all the websites for parents. So this is something they could check and say, is this a good idea for kids to be watching that? Is this a good idea for kids to be playing this game? Because one of my grandchildren, she loves to watch videos on how to make slime. Let me just tell you, I don't like slime. It's slimy. And so, but she wants to not only watch videos on slime, the most interesting thing of all is she wants to make videos on how to make slime. So what she's doing is she's making slime in the kitchen, making a mess, of course, and videotaping herself making the slime, and then she's putting this up online somewhere, probably on YouTube. And now she's got a little business where she actually sells slime online. And it's like she's 9, okay? So this is, I thought, really creative. And so I don't recommend, slime to all these parents, of course. But I'm just saying that, 1 hour they pick, 1 hour you pick. And, as they get, I think, older, maybe it can be a little bit more time, but it's important for them to realize that it's a collaboration. And that's why it starts early in childhood. And in high school, maybe a lot of their stuff is going to be online learning. So Khan Academy, for example, or other things where they want to learn. Google has Google Explorations, 3D. And you buy this little cardboard thing for $5, and then kids can travel around the world. So there's a lot of great stuff. So I don't want to limit it. I just want to curate it so that we can make it a really great experience for the child and take advantage of this tech world that we all live in.
So there's one thing that I do want to turn to because, as always, we're running out of time. But one thing that I'd really love to unpack is how we can apply TRIC to businesses and quickly just go through all the parts of that acronym. So trust, for example, seems to be the hardest thing for companies to achieve out of the TRIC model. Why is that, and how can that be improved?
So trust is the most important thing that companies need to understand that impacts their creativity. And there's a book out there called How. And How also focuses on, it's for business, the business world. They say trust is the number one thing between the employer and the employee. When you trust an employee and you respect an employee, they feel much better about themselves, and they want to be part of the team and work to make sure that whatever it is your company is doing is going to be the best it can be. And there's another book that just came out, The $1 Trillion Coach, Bill Campbell, and it was written by Eric Schmidt, and he was a former executive chair of Google. and Jonathan Rosenberg, who also worked at Google, and they talk about how trust is what really was the foundation of everything that happened at Google and happens in a lot of Silicon Valley companies. And I know it's hard for most companies to somehow feel that they can trust their employees. And that's why we have things like, I'm not kidding, they sell these products where you can check the amount of time your employee has been sitting in a seat, and so that they're not up walking around. You know, that is not the way to go. You want that employee to feel like they're part of a team and that they are working together with their teammates to do the best they can do for the company. And so the whole acronym involves, it's trusting them, respecting their ideas. They might not be right, but at least they should be in an environment where they feel comfortable sharing, giving them some independence, collaborating, and then treating them with kindness. I mean, we all make mistakes, everybody, all day. And so we need to remember how important it is to treat each other with kindness, because that kindness, it helps more kindness. It builds on each other. And so it's important for people to realize that kindness is key to trust and respect and independence. And the whole trick model works. Works for companies, works for life, works in your marriage, works in school, and works in your parenting.
So when it comes to parenting, one of the things that really stood out, especially in the foreword when your daughters wrote, the amount of fun and silliness that comes with that as well. We've talked about trick and these very set ways of doing it, and that sounds really exciting, but part of what was coming out is that having that kind of aspect of fun throughout their whole childhood from an authority figure, from parents like yourself, made a huge difference. Do you find that fun and silliness is all part and parcel of being successful?
Yes, I do think fun and silliness is part of being successful, because it's a sense of humor. You know, everything in life, there's a lot of things that don't go right, and you can either cry about them or you can laugh about them, or perhaps you can do a combination of both. So I do tend to be pretty silly most of the time. And it's gotten me into it's been fun. I have a great time doing it. And my daughters wrote about this in the introduction. I guess they just saw me. You know, I had been at Target, which is one of my favorite stores in the US, and they had a hot dog costume there. I could not resist. I am not kidding. So I put it on. I dressed up like a hot dog. That was just in time for Halloween, right? And then I took a picture of myself, or had somebody do that, and then posted it on Facebook. Why not, you know? But that is the kind of thing that I think it's fun to do things like that. And in class, I do a lot of fun things all the time. I mean, the students never know what to expect. But then that engenders fun on their behalf. You know, they do things that are fun too. So when you're in a fun environment, you think of fun things to do as well. And so why not make it fun? You know, I just flew here last night. You know, I arrived at 1:30, and so I did everything I could to make this morning fun, and it has been fun. I took my picture with a very large blue gorilla, and I'm
at Gatwick?
No, there was another place where but I saw this large blue fuzzy, was not alive, right? It was a statue. But I think life can be fun if you don't take it so seriously. It's important. Remember that, you know, be an optimist. I mean, the alternative is worse.
And you've achieved so much in your life and career, but what would you say has been the proudest moment for you?
Well, the proudest moments, I think, for me are my daughters and their achievements. And, you know, when I gave birth to all of them, you know, they were just little girls, right? And it was exciting for me to have daughters and be a mother. I had a great time being a mother. But I never expected them to rise to the positions they have today in the world. And I'm very proud of what they've done, and I'm very proud of Susan and what she's doing with YouTube. And it's a very difficult path to follow, but she's blazing a path in the 21st century. Nobody else has done it. And then Janet is doing the same thing in pediatrics and diet and medicine and how do we keep our children healthy? And then Anne with 23andMe, you know, understanding your genetics and how that impacts you, and can you make a difference in your life by understanding your DNA? Turns out, yes, you can, and it's an important thing. So I'm really proud of them for, you know, being on these paths that they picked themselves, and they're trying to make the world a better place. And I mean, that's what we should all be doing. So I'm thrilled to have amazing daughters and amazing students. And thank you for inviting me here and letting me talk about it.
Well, thank you very much for coming. It's been an incredibly inspirational interview, so thank you very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
And thank you everyone who has joined us today. But I'm afraid that's all that we've got time for. You've been watching Global Change Agents. I'm Leanna Brinded. We'll see you next time.